This right here is the Nintendo Switch Lite. Time to review it. Ah yes, the Nintendo Switch. The must-have console everywhere, with almost 162 million units worldwide as of recording this video. Saying that Nintendo has a successful console on their hands is an understatement. After the failure that was the Wii U, Nintendo decided to go back to the drawing board and release something a little different for their next generation console. And so, in 2017, they decided to combine both the functionality of a home console and a portable console all in one. It was a pretty risky move, but as proven by the sales numbers, Nintendo made a very, very good decision. Unlike the Wii U's god-awful marketing, Nintendo decided to up the ante with the Switch's marketing by marketing it mainly towards an older audience. People who don't necessarily have a whole lot of time to just sit in front of a TV and play games for hours on end. They have real-life responsibilities. And the nice thing about the Switch is that you can just plug it into your TV when you're home, and then if you have to go somewhere, just take it out and play it on the go. And it worked. It worked really, really well. In 2019, Nintendo released the Switch Lite, which is a handheld-only version of the Switch, so you can't plug it into the TV, unfortunately. But it plays most of the same games, and it still has that fantastic Switch experience. This is also the second time that Nintendo has used the Lite branding for one of their consoles. The first time being the Nintendo DS Lite in 2006. And that's Lite spelled L-I-T-E, not light as in one of those. Unlike my previous review videos, this Switch isn't actually mine. I'm sharing it with my girlfriend and she gave me permission to review it, so thanks, babe. I think we got it back in July of this year, and I haven't really been playing a whole lot of it. She's been playing a lot of Animal Crossing New Horizons on it, which she absolutely loves it. But from what I've experienced with it so far, I like it. It's great. I do kind of wish that we had the original Switch model, but due to global events that are currently happening, the regular Switch model is nowhere to be found in stores. It is basically sold out everywhere. But luckily that hasn't really affected the Switch Lite because, unlike the regular Switch, this one's a little easier to find in stores right now. So as much as I would love to have the original Switch model, this is a good starting point, and I can easily upgrade to a regular Switch from here. So on the front of the Switch we have our variety of controls. We have the minus button, plus button, we have an actual D-pad, unlike on the regular Switch, which is only 4 face buttons, just like the A, B, Y, and X buttons. I much prefer a regular D-pad, and that's the one thing I do really like about the Switch Lite compared to the original. We also have 2 analog sticks, which also click in. The Wii U gamepad as well as the Wii U Pro controller also did that. Unsurprisingly, they have that feature. We also have our home button as well as our A, B, Y, and X face buttons, of course. We will also find our L and R buttons as well as our ZL and ZR buttons. And then a new button that they added on the Switch was the share button, or is it the capture button? I can't quite remember what it's actually called. But just like Xbox One and PlayStation 4, you can capture screenshots as well as short clips on the Nintendo Switch and share them on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, the likes. We also have our 720p touchscreen. Yes, this is indeed a touchscreen, and a real one, because unlike the Wii U and 3DS touchscreens, which were resistive, this is an actual capacitive touchscreen, which is really, really nice. So you don't have to calibrate it every so often. And while sure, yes, it is only 720p, it still looks surprisingly sharp. On the bottom of the Switch, we'll find 2 stereo speakers, which actually sound pretty crisp. They put out some pretty good sound. We also have a USB Type-C port for charging as well as accessories, which is really, really nice. On the regular Switch, this would also be used to connect it to the docking station to connect it to a TV. But since you can't do that with the Switch, This port is only used for charging and accessories. That's it. It is a little annoying that it's on the bottom of the Switch instead of like on the top or on the side somewhere, but it's only a minor gripe. Further on down the line, we'll also find our micro SD card slot. I'm not entirely sure what the storage limit is. I think you can go up to 512 gigabytes or 1 terabyte cards. I'm not entirely sure. I don't have an SD card in there right now, but I'd like to get one eventually. On the top of the Switch, we'll find our power button, our volume controls, the fan outtake vent. Yes, the Switch does indeed have a fan on it. And luckily, it is very, very quiet, or at least what I've noticed on the Nintendo Switch Lite. It might be a little louder on the regular Switch, especially if you have it in docked mode, because it overclocks the CPU. But I haven't noticed any major fan noise on the Switch, and that's a good thing. We'll also find our headphone jack and the spot to put in our Switch game cards. On the back of the Switch, we have the giant Nintendo Switch logo, just in case you forgot that you're playing a Nintendo Switch. Funny enough, it doesn't say Nintendo Switch Lite anywhere on this console. Not on the physical console, not even in the actual main menu does it actually call itself the Switch Lite, which is kind of weird. We also have our air intake vent. We also have the Nintendo logo, of course, as well as just random irrelevant information. And unlike on the regular Switch model, which uses like clicky buttons for their face buttons, on the Switch Lite they feel a little more like, I wouldn't say mushy, I don't think that's the right word for it, but they feel, I don't know, they feel like they have a membrane in there versus actually having a little switch in there. It's kind of hard to explain without actually trying it out for yourself. But I do prefer this style of face buttons just a little more. Clicky buttons don't really bother me. I mean, they have clicky buttons on the 3DS and that doesn't really bother me all that much. But I just prefer this style of buttons a little more. So what exactly is powering this little guy? Well, the Switch and the Switch Lite share the exact same specs, except unlike the regular Switch, since the Switch Lite can't actually use the docking station, it can't overclock the CPU. So it's just stuck at that base clock speed. So for a system on a chip, the Switch uses an NVIDIA Tegra X1 Plus, or at least the Switch Lite does. It's basically a revision of the Tegra X1 that was found in the Switch when it first launched, except it has better power efficiency as well as slightly higher clock speeds. For a CPU, it uses an ARM quad-core Cortex A57 plus an ARM quad-core Cortex A53 clocked at 1.02 gigahertz. For memory, the Switch has 4 gigabytes of LPDDR4, twice the amount of RAM that the Wii U had. For storage, the Switch has built-in 32 gigabytes eMMC memory, which will fill up very, very fast. I highly recommend getting a micro SD card if you're going to play more than like 2 games. The Switch supports micro SD HC, and micro SD XC cards up to 2 terabytes, which is really, really nice. The Switch has a 5.5-inch 720p LCD display with 267 ppi. For the graphics chip, it has an NVIDIA GM20B Maxwell-based GPU clocked between 307.2 and 768 megahertz, which it would clock up to 768 megahertz when you have it in docked mode, and it would clock down to 307 when you have it in portable mode. For sound, the Switch only supports linear PCM 2.0 channel stereo speakers, although it does have pseudo surround sound. For battery life, the Switch has a 3570 mAh battery and can provide between 3 to 7 hours of playtime, depending on what kind of game you're playing. And finally, the Switch weighs 277 grams or 9.8 ounces. Now, they did remove some features for the Switch Lite in order to cut down costs. The Switch Lite doesn't have HD Rumble. It doesn't have built-in Joy-Cons, although it still has Joy-Con support. As I mentioned earlier, you can't use a dock with it, so it can't connect to a TV. It also doesn't have that breakout kickstand like the regular Switch had. And I think that's about it. So overall, you're not really losing a whole lot of functionality. Now let's talk about some games. And the thing is, because I haven't had the Switch all that long, I don't have any physical games for it right now, mainly because most of the good ones are still very, very expensive. But I still have a few digital ones. Most of them are demos though, but at least I still have something to show off for gameplay. But we first have to turn the Switch on, so let's do just that. Nice splash screen. So here's the first screen that you see when you turn on the Nintendo Switch, and just to get this out of the way, this is going to be very, very hard to get on camera. Oh my god, if you would just stay on, thank you. But yeah, as I was saying, this is going to be kind of hard to get on camera because there's no easy way to capture a screen on a handheld system, so just bear with me. If this thing would just stay on, come on. There we go. So let's get into the main menu. And here we are. Alright, the first game I have is The Elder Scrolls Blades. This is basically a free-to-play spin-off game. It's set between Elder Scrolls Oblivion and Skyrim, I want to say. And it's actually kind of fun. There's a ridiculous amount of grinding that is involved in the game, which kind of makes it very annoying to progress through the game, but it's still pretty fun. I think I've only logged in 5 hours into the game. It just goes to show how much I've actually used the Switch so far. But from those 5 hours, I've had a pretty good time with it. Elder Scrolls Blades is also on Android and iOS in case you wanted to play it on there. But really, I would much prefer to have physical controls. Just play it on Switch. I also have Ori and the Blind Forest, which is only a demo version. I have not played this game, so I can't say anything about it. Mr. Driller in Drill Land. Again, this is also a demo, and yet again, I haven't played it yet. Speedrunners, which is, again, another demo. I played a ridiculous amount of this game on Steam, and it is so much fun. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite indie games of all time. Play it on any platform of your choosing, you'll have a great time. Asphalt 9 Legends. This game is also on Android and iOS, I want to say. And I haven't played a whole lot of it, but from what I've played, it looks and plays pretty well on Switch. And that's all I can say about it. Tetris 99. Again, I haven't played this game yet. I just downloaded it to try it out when I actually have time. I've heard it's really, really fun. That's all I can say about it. And of course we have Hulu and YouTube on here. Unfortunately the Switch does not have Netflix, which is a real shame. I really wish they had Netflix. Come on, Nintendo. But hey, at least they have Hulu and YouTube, so that's something. And finally we have Animal Crossing New Horizons. I haven't played this game. My girlfriend has been playing a whole lot of this game. She really enjoys it. So, I guess if that's any takeaway of how the game is, there you go. From her experience, it's a fantastic game. Then again, it's Animal Crossing. Of course it's awesome. So, we're going to do things a little out of order here. Normally, I show off the UI of the console first before showing off the games. But, since I only have digital games, and I had to turn on the console to show them off, I figured we'd just do it this way, so yeah. Anyways, so here's the main menu of the Switch itself. Very clean, very well laid out, I gotta say. Your games and applications are going to be laid out on these squares right here. And as you can see, you can have quite a bit of space, which I believe it'll automatically give you more spaces the more you fill up your console. I think, I'm not entirely sure. And at the top we have our accounts, the date, Wi-Fi connection, and the battery percentage. There's also an indicator at the bottom of the screen that'll show you which control layout that you're using. As you can see right now we're using the Switch itself because I don't have a Switch Pro controller, which would make things a lot easier to show off the UI, but unfortunately we gotta work with what we have. We also have 6 additional options at the bottom of the screen. We have news, which will show us various news about upcoming games and whatnot, as well as sales and demos, the likes. Nintendo Eshop is exactly what it sounds like. It gives you access to the Eshop, which is where you download new games and applications. Album is where you view your screenshots as well as the screen clips that you've taken. Here's a couple of screenshots that me and my girlfriend took. This is one that I took in Elder Scrolls Blades. And then here's a couple that she took in Animal Crossing. Controllers is where you set up your controller configuration. So for example, if you have multiple controllers hooked up, you can change the order, as well as if you can't find your controllers, which this mainly applies to the Joy-Cons. If you press find controllers, the Joy-Cons will actually vibrate, and it's easier to find them if you lost them somewhere. You can also pair new controllers from this screen as well, which is really nice. System settings is exactly what it sounds like. You can change everything from setting it to airplane mode, screen brightness, the lock screen, parental controls, internet, data management. You can also create your own Mii from this screen. Yes, the Switch does have a Mii feature, which is quite nice. You can also change amiibo settings, adjust your theme, notification settings, sleep mode, controllers and sensors, and general system settings. And finally, we have sleep mode, which will obviously put the console in sleep mode. Pretty self-explanatory. So yeah, the Switch UI has quite a lot of useful features. So playing a 2D game like Speedrunners, it's very, very nice to have an actual D-pad. I have used the quote-unquote D-pad that the Switch Joy-Cons use, and yeah, those work, but nowhere near as effective as actually having a real D-pad. The buttons on the Switch Lite also feel very responsive. Even though they do feel a little more mushy than on the Joy-Cons, they're still very responsive, and that's always a good thing. The triggers on the Switch are also pretty decent. They're not analog, unfortunately, so there's only on or off, and that's it. But that honestly doesn't really bother me all that much. It does feel really weird, but at least they work. And that's the most important thing. God, who remembers the first Asphalt on Nintendo DS? That was the shit back then. It wasn't the best racing game in the world, but it was actually pretty darn good for what it was. The analog sticks feel really, really nice. I can barely notice any dead zones. I'm just barely pressing on the stick and my character is already walking. Those are really, really tight. I'm not entirely sure how well this is picking up on camera, but in person, like I mentioned before, even though this is a 720p screen, it's still surprisingly sharp. It's a lot better than the Wii U gamepad's screen, that's for sure. I think that was running at like, what, 480p? And now with this screen, we actually get HD resolution, which is very nice. And so, that was the review of the Nintendo Switch Lite. Even though it's a handheld-only version of the Switch, you're still getting that fantastic experience, and that's the most important thing. But should you pick one up? Well, yes and no. Let me explain. The Switch Lite is currently $100 cheaper than the regular Switch at $200. And honestly, that's one hell of a deal. If you've never owned a Switch before, or if you just don't care about playing Switch games on the TV, then yes, pick one of these up. Especially because these are much easier to find in stores right now. However, if you want the option to play Switch games on the TV, I would recommend just shelling out the additional money and picking up the regular Switch. But for those first-time buyers, or hell, even if you want a secondary Switch, it just makes sense to pick up one of these, especially at that amazing price. Nintendo really knocked it out of the park with this hybrid console idea. I think they should definitely stick with it for the next generation console. It would be stupid not to, considering how successful it has been. So, I think that wraps it up. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time in another review of some kind.
Well, it was a good thing I was still recording. Wow. That was unexpected.